Hello and welcome again to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and this is Renate McNay.
Hello.
And today we're moderating a programme on non-duality, which has been very popular on Conscious TV. And we've got three guests in the studio who are, I don't know if I can use the word expert, but they talk a lot about non-duality. Richard Sylvester. Hi Richard. Tim Freke. Hi Tim. And David Bingham.
Hello.
Hello, David. And first of all, I'm going to show you some of their books. Richard has written 3 books on non-duality. I Hope You Die Soon, The Book of No One, and he has a new book which is coming out in fairly shortly called Drink Tea, Eat Cake. And Tim has several books out. How Long Is Now, which I think is his latest book, and also Lucid Living and a CD, Lucid Living, and David's first book is yet to come.
So, what is non-duality? And I think, Richard, as you wrote 3 books about it, you seem to be the expert. Why don't we start with you?
Well, I'll reveal that your question directed to me came out of my saying that although I've written 3 books on non-duality, I find this an extraordinarily difficult question to answer, or to answer briefly. But if I try, I would say that the seeing of non-duality is the seeing of life as it actually is. And that can only happen when the sense of being a separate person falls away. And when the sense of separation falls away, then we see that there is only oneness, there is non-duality, not two-ness, and that everything is one. And this is both baffling and a mystery, and the person who feels separate struggles with what that can possibly mean. And then when it's seen, it's just seen stunningly clearly, and there can be no argument with it, as it were. But unfortunately, they can't really be a putting of it into words either. So in a sense, whenever we talk about this, all we're really doing is kind of trying to sort of hedge around discussing something at the margins which can never be grasped through language or indeed through thought. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you. Tim, what is non-duality?
Well, I think Richard did a great job at trying to express the inexpressible, and I would agree with all of that. Let me try and add something to it, perhaps, which I feel is important to me, is that it's seeing that which is before your thoughts, in that your concepts are dividing everything up, they're making everything separate. But what's there before the thoughts? There's no separation. And then the state of seeing it, which Richard, you mentioned, for me, the way it happens is the analogy that really opens it up for me is it's like lucid dreaming. So I find myself in this predicament very similar to being in a lucid dream, where I'm in 2 places at once, where there's this, before the thoughts, this is presence, which is like the dreamer, in the analogy, except it's right now. And then there's Tim in this flow of colours and shapes and sounds and thoughts, and he's separate and here and living a life. So here it's all 2 and it's all many, and then here it's not. There's no divisions between anything. Just like when you dream at night, it looks like everything's separate, but if you dream lucidly, you can see that you're the dreamer and it's all you. It's all one, and those 2 sit together. And for me, the non-duality side of it, here's the duality, and that's the non-duality. That's where there is no divisions. Everything's one. So it's like, I call it lucid living. You mentioned the book, because it's like lucid dreaming, but now. Normally we're in just the duality, and this whole adventure we're going to be talking about is about discovering the other side, which is where it's not dual, where it's one.
Okay. David, what do you have to say?
Non-duality is an idea that's been introduced within concepts of separation to make it appear as though there's a state called non-duality that can be attained. But actually, what is real, that which never changes, has always been here. It's just that it hasn't been recognised as being that. The bombardment through the senses and the whole of the kind of relative matrix of life that we appear to be living through obscures the reality that is already here. But it isn't something that can be attained, it can only be realised because it is already the case.
Can I add something, drawing on a very traditional metaphor that came to me while Tim was speaking? I mean, the traditional metaphor, which a lot of people will know, is of the waves and the ocean.
Yes.
And kind of, if we think of, let's say, a state of awareness of the non-dual being the stillness and the silence of the depths of the ocean, and the waves represent the drama of everyday life, and we know that that can sometimes be extremely choppy, those waves, or they can sometimes be a bit calmer. But it seems like there are these two things going on, but we know that they're not. We know that there is no such thing as separate waves. The waves are simply the ocean waving, if you like. They are the same thing. And so there is something about this realisation. It's that realisation that the drama of life, which still goes on, whether this is seen or whether it isn't seen, the drama of life still goes on. But in this, if you like, this realisation, it's known or seen that those choppy waves on the surface of the ocean, no matter how choppy they get, are the same as the depths of the ocean. They are the same as the silence and the stillness. There's no difference.
Good.
So what we did was we put out the fact we were having these panels to the Conscious TV viewers, and we've had many questions back via email. And I'm going to start by asking two questions which are very similar and typify many other questions we've had. And they are, what are the practical steps we can take towards the awakened state? And what can we do to attain liberation?
Or, in your words, how can we dive or disappear in the ocean?
So maybe we start with you, Tim, for this
Well,
question.
you know, the whole of life, it seems to me, is that process. That's what life is. Life is the process. So the only thing which you do, it seems to me, is engage with the process. And so what I have done in my life is be an explorer. Here we are. We're in this incredible mystery. There's things happening. I mean, it's an incredible event. This, we know it's not really there now, but it feels like it is, and we're here and you're there, and I'm thinking thoughts, you don't know what they are. We're in a universe which appears to be so big we can't even conceive it. Is to enter into that with a spirit of wonder and to be conscious of that mystery. There's many things, but that is so fundamental, so simple. To look at it, to be able to look at this glass of water and go, well, it's a glass of water. Or to look at it and go, wow, glass of water. And to actually see the mystery inherent in our being, that we are, that it is. And what that does, for me, is it opens it out. Suddenly, I'm not caught into the appearances in the same way. I'm aware of this background, which is there all the time, which is, I haven't got a clue what this is. I don't know, on that level, I don't know anything, really. Fundamentally, I don't know what life is. And in my experience, nobody does. And when I become into that consciousness of the omnipresent mystery, consciousness starts to change immediately, just instantly. So that's a very simple thing, which people can do now while they're watching this show. We're watching a show. It looks like, you've got, whatever, you're on your computer or your TV. Somebody's talking. He's written a book. That's what he does. Right. And then you look at it again. You go, hang on a second. Thoughts, whatever the hell they are arising in consciousness here, whatever the hell that is. And it's something to do, apparently, with the porridge in my head, all going, and then it's encoding that into language, into words. And then that's moving my tongue. It's exhaling it across, and it's vibrating, and it's going into your ears. And then these ideas, whatever they are arising somehow through this separateness between consciousness and consciousness. I mean, that's incredible. Or even if it's going through the media, it's going through cameras and electronics and the interweb, and off it goes and does its thing. I mean, how amazing is that? And when I stop letting it be confined, there's this spaciousness opens up. I can step into the mystery. So just noticing the most obvious thing, that you don't know what's happening, can be the most powerful thing. Just to see.
Thank you.
I don't know.
David.
Over the over the past 2 or 3 years, speaking to quite a few people, what I've noticed is that there are kind of two categories that people fall into in terms of seeking, and I was certainly in one of those. When one's true infinite nature is seen, and it's seen by itself, then there's also a realization that it's actually all going by itself in reality. That the idea that we are separate individuals who can do something, that's part of the entertainment. But when there was clear seeing, there was a feeling of wanting to share this with everyone. So for me, I saw clearly as a result of listening to a recording of an interview with an American called John Wheeler. And so I went out and I recorded, 100 copies of his CD because I wanted everyone to know this. And I, got my address book out and I had a look at everyone, and I mailed them all off. And I said, because I was absolutely sure that because this is how I saw it, that everyone else would also see it. But that was the mind, that was the residue of the idea that it's the individual who knows what to do. Of course, what happened is, I got a few phone calls saying, "What did you send me that for? I couldn't even understand it. It was a complete waste of time. What you really need to do is this." So doing that for maybe 6 months, I realised that all I could do was just stop. I just had to stop trying to force anything, because the mind saying that I've got to do this was just absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Thank you.
So what I then did was nothing, but as a result of that, people started coming to me, people started knocking my door, writing to me. And then what I noticed is that the infinite intelligence that is actually behind everything started to orchestrate everything. So the individuality went out of it. So I realised I had to do nothing, because the people that needed to hear my version of the way this is would just turn up anyway. And that's what's happened. So really, it's about resonance. The thing that people can do is, in a way there's nothing you can do, but it's really following one's intuition and resonating with particular teachers that you feel, have something that is of value to you. There are a lot of teachers that you won't resonate with. There'll be some that you do. But this is the whole rich tapestry of it. There isn't, to me, all things are equally true. That I've no dispute about non-duality or the way anyone experiences life. It's really just about resonance. It's about, where do you feel there is value in this experience and in this realisation?
Thank you.
Okay.
Richard.
I think my starting point would be, I would say that it isn't a state. The question was about awakening or liberation or realisation as a state.
What can we do to attain
this
liberation?
state? Firstly, I'd say, well, it isn't a state. If it was a state, there would be something that we could do to attain it, because we can do things to attain, any kind of state we can seek to attain. But it isn't a state. It's a completely impersonal seeing, and as such, it has absolutely nothing to do with me, with who I am, with who I have been in a so-called past, or anything that I've ever done in my so-called history. So for somebody who, for example, has spent 30 years meditating, which I did, it could be quite irritating then to come across somebody who's never even heard the word liberation and is perhaps going up an escalator in Selfridges one day and suddenly they're not there, which is all we're talking about here. We're talking about the disappearance of the person, the realisation that there doesn't have to be a person for there to be a going up an escalator in Selfridges.
Can you just explain that more? Because that confuses people. When you say they discover there's no one there, what does that actually mean?
For me, what we're talking about is the realisation or the seeing, the direct seeing that there is no person. It's an absolutely stunning revelation that for 30, 40, 50, 60 years it seems like there is a person here, and of course there has to be a person here to do things. How could things get done with no person? How could a kettle be bought for my kitchen with no person to buy it? And suddenly there is this revelation that kettles are perfectly capable of being bought without the need for a person to buy them. I mean, one of the nicest descriptions of this, I think, is Nathan Gill, who describes, he gets on a bicycle, he rides down a country lane, and then suddenly there is no person cycling down a country lane, but there is still cycling down a country lane. That's the revelation. That's all we're talking about, in a way. And as I said before, it can be quite irritating, particularly for somebody like myself who did meditate for 30 years. It could be quite irritating to come across an individual, let's say, who had never even heard the word liberation, and yet one day perhaps was lying on a beach looking at the sea, and suddenly there was no one lying on a beach. But there was still lying on a beach looking at the sea, and the revelation is there is no need for a person to be doing that. If you like, the person is completely redundant.
Sorry, this experience, Richard, seems to happen more and more to people. I mean, we hear all kinds of...
A contradiction in terms, surely.
What I'm interested in, is this an actual experience, and what did you experience, or is this a deep understanding or a knowledge?
Golly, words are so difficult. I would say, firstly, it isn't an experience. Second, it is not an experience, I would say. It is not something that happened to me. It has nothing to do with understanding, and it has nothing to do with knowledge. There can be a person who has a very deep knowledge of non-duality, Advaita, etc., and a very deep understanding of it on a mental level, and this counts for absolutely nothing. And meanwhile, there may be somebody going up an escalator. Why change the metaphor if we don't have to? There may be somebody going up an escalator who's never heard the word, who's never been interested in philosophy, spiritual matters, seeking of this kind, and suddenly there's no one there, and it's simply seen that there is only oneness, and there never has been a person.
But it must be an incredibly frightening experience.
Not it must be, it can be, and there are reports from people, and occasionally from people, there are reports from individuals, and occasionally individuals come and see me to talk about this, where it has been quite scary or very scary. On other occasions, if you like, or for other individuals, not at all. And there's no rules about this. There's no rules about what kind of emotion or feeling might follow on this kind of seeing.
Did you have a similar experience, Tim?
Yeah.
Of disappearing?
Yeah, a few times. Oh, don't do that. But as you can see, I'm back. Yeah, I don't know. Words are interesting things. I'm a philosopher, so I love them as well as hate them. How we talk about this, like you were saying, David, in one way it really makes no difference, because it is just a mystery, and you're just placing stones in the mystery. And yet, how we talk about it, how we think about it, does actually affect what we see and how we live. So in another way, it does matter. And I find myself always with these, in that way and this way. Because of this, the fundamental feeling for me is the insight is not so much of non-duality, but of a profound polarity, or to use the word that I think you might have used before, paradox. That a thing about a polarity is that it's opposites which coexist. So it's one and it's two at the same time. Left is the opposite of right. You can't have left without right. You can't imagine a world with just up and no down. They come together, and yet they're opposites. So they're one and they're two at the same time. And the nature of reality seems to me to be more of that than it is that it's one. It's one and it's two at the same time. So that there's always this polarity to things, and that I can't prejudice one over the other. There was a time when I would have, and I would have probably said something quite similar to what Richard said, which I still completely resonate with and agree with, and feel like, I know what you're saying. And yet, what's happened is that it's returned to, do you know what? Persons, I love them. The personal, it's so precious. God, it's so beautiful. My daughter is so gorgeous. She's my daughter. She's Tim's. Tim's little journey through life in this great mystery. Meeting you and hearing yours, that personal, and what kind of worries me slightly about the disappearing person trick is the feeling that gets lost. Whereas what I want to say is, look, that is absolutely real. Well, I mean, I hope I'm not misjudging it, that I understand completely what Richard's saying. And there's a place you can come to, and it's a place where it's all one. And yet the person doesn't have to die or disappear or anything. It's just still there doing what it did before. And it's still personal, and you can still enter right into the personal, and it's gorgeous, and it's lovely, and it's terrifying, and it's everything, all the polarities of life. And they coexist. And what I've found is that being with myself and with others, once people can see nothing needs to go anywhere, this thing which can sound impossible to really get is suddenly obvious. It's there the whole time. It's always there. Who we really are is just always there. Whilst we think we've got to get rid of something or find... I mean, don't get me wrong, in my book Lucid Living, there's a chapter called You Are Not a Person, which I nicked from Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, because when I read that line, it pinned me to the ground and it opened me up and wow, and led to a whole journey. But it only feels like it's one side of the polarity. Here, it's no person. But here, it's all personal. It's precise. Here, I don't know what you're thinking. It's separate. You don't know what I'm thinking. I'm going to think a word. You don't know what it was. You don't even know if I did it. That separateness is obvious, undeniable. And in the same way, if you come back to here, the oneness is undeniable. And the two sit together in a paradox, in a polarity. And somehow we get lost in the separateness. You want to get to the oneness. You get to the oneness, in my experience, suddenly you fall in love with the separateness. You want to get right back into there, because then you've got them both. Because then you're looking at the whole picture, not just half of it.
Do you want to add further comment on that, David?
Yeah, I'd like to, because the way the whole thing unfolded is that I actually went to see Tony Parsons at a particular point in the kind of unfolding, and Tony's perspective, which is quite close to Richard's, I found at that point absolutely invaluable, because it actually strips away all of the duality. It gets rid of all of the ideas of the individual having to do something, because up until that point there's the idea that there is an individual who has to do things like meditation or yoga or deep cleansing or whatever it is for that person to become liberated. When I heard Tony say, well, actually there is no one, it was such an absolute relief, because you realise there is no one. Ultimately there is no one. In an absolute sense there is no one, because the absolute nature is impersonal. But in a relative sense, there's a relative someone, which is illusory and ever-changing. So really you can say, ultimately, the absolute truth is that there is no one, because there is only impersonal being. But in a relative sense, what you could say is that consciousness, or whatever you wish to call it, awareness, being, whatever term you use, this, whatever word, it loves playing the game. It loves the contrast, as Tim was saying. It loves the distinction between this clear open space within which everything can happen, which is a field of all possibilities, and then bringing that right into a single point of focus. But to me, it's really making the distinction between the evolution of the relative aspect of consciousness, because consciousness in a relative sense constantly changes, constantly evolves. There is the opportunity in a relative or illusory way, if you want to use those terms, for it to be progressive, but actually it's all happening within that in which nothing truly is happening. In the same way, as with a cinema screen, it's only by virtue of the cinema screen that everything can appear to be happening, and nothing that's happening on the screen is affecting the screen. But it doesn't mean that once this is seen, that you just have to look at the screen and you don't have to project anything on it anymore. You use the screen because that's what it's for. And to me, the nature of consciousness, the nature of this, is to play with it. To me, the way I see it is that, yes, once it's seen that one's true nature is infinite being, or whatever term you want to use, and truly there is no one, there has to be that point where you realise that there is no one. Ultimately, there is no one. Until you know that there is no one, until you know that one's true nature is impersonal, then you can't really enjoy the contrast of the game. You can't enjoy the contrast between the point value of experience.
Can I sort of comment on, partly on what Tim said? I think in a way that might be at least in the same ballpark, if not pretty close to what I was saying about the waves and the ocean. You know, that there are, if you like, there appears to be these two things, because the dream, if you like, this waking dream of reality goes on, even if, you know, even when the depths of the ocean are known. And I would say that it's really only when there has been this seeing that the waves, or the waking dream, if you like, can be enjoyed for the miracle that it is. I mean, you were referring to the glass of water before. I quite like picking up glasses of water as well and saying, look, this is the miracle. You know, we don't have to look out there for anything else. This is the miracle that we are looking for. It's what the Buddhists mean when they say samsara and nirvana are one. You know, this is nirvana already. If we can't see it, it's only because there's a person there looking for it. And I think, you know, the reason why this, if you like, is only seen for the incredible miracle that it is when the person has been seen through, is because when the person is there, the person tends to be full of neurosis. And the one thing that neurosis is extremely good at is making everything dull and grey. Because you could say that, you know, for a normal person, which means a normally neurotic person, you know, I'm not really experiencing this, you, or even this glass of water. What I'm experiencing is my neurotic projections of you. So, of course, everything seems shadowy and dull and grey and filled with my neurotic fears and my neurotic hopes. And all of that. When the person drops away, it does tend to explode a lot of that neurotic energy. And so suddenly, if you like, and this is only a metaphor, but if you like, suddenly everything's in Technicolor. Because suddenly, I'm going to say, I am seeing reality as it actually is. Of course, it's not me that's seeing it, but suddenly reality is seen as it actually is. And that's why we can sit here in this apparently perfectly ordinary studio in an area of West London and say, this is it. This is already it. There is no need to search for anything else. Okay. It will, whatever you search for and whatever you find, it will never get better than this. It will never get better than this glass of water. Whether you take that as good news or bad news, that is the case.
And that's why it feels really important to me. It's like you use the word, and I know exactly why you used it, and I use it myself, I write it in the books. You know, it's illusory, and that's a powerful word, and it's a traditional word, and you can apply it in spirituality, you can apply it just as well in physics. You know, the appearances are illusory in some way. And yet I feel like we need to be so careful with the language also, because for me it's like the Indian word Maya is often translated as that. But another perfectly good translation of that word is magic. And it feels more like, you know, if you're going to say it's an illusion, you have to say it in the tone of voice that you might if you'd just seen one of the, you know, Derren Brown do some amazing thing. You're like, wow, that's an illusion, with complete awe. Because there's what I really struggle with, having immersed myself in spirituality and philosophy for all my life, is that so often this is dismissed, rather than, like Richard was saying, of actually this is where you come back to, that this is, you know, that this is incredible, and to miss this show would be just, you know, I mean, it doesn't matter, but it's a kind of, it's a bit of a tragic waste, and so that when we're talking about the oneness, it's not to get away from the separateness. It's not to get away from anything. It's actually to wake up to a place where it truly is just one, so that you can enter into the separateness, into the manyness, from a whole new perspective.
So Tim, when I listen to you now, you say, move back and listen and see the magic. But the question was actually, is there something we can do? And you all somehow seem to agree in the beginning there isn't really something
I think there's loads you can do.
I want to move on to another question which expands this a little bit.
Could I just comment, by the way, that I would never use the word illusion for this. You know, I mean, if reality means anything, and it clearly does, then this is reality. This is as real as it gets. And I would keep the word illusion. That is real. Exactly. That's as real as it gets. And I would keep the word illusion for magic tricks and maybe mental visions of things that aren't really there and so forth. This is reality.
I want to move on so we get a few questions.
I understand.
Okay. And this is expansion on the previous questions. I think is quite interesting. And the question is, if what I am cannot be conceptualized, and conceptualization has no author, then am I powerless? I think this comes up for a lot of people. Are they powerless if there's no one there? So maybe start with you, David, on this one.
In essence, the being that we are it's both omnipotent and also it's incapable of doing anything. But to me, it's making the distinction between that which never changes, that which isn't doing anything. The impersonal being, that to me, the impersonal is that which never changes. It's that, like, as Ramana Maharshi says, only that which is present in deep dreamless sleep is real, because that never changes. That state actually permeates all of the changing states, the waking, dreaming and deep sleep states, and any spiritual states also. But the empowerment is actually in seeing that where you are, there is always the invitation. There's the invitation to do or to know or make a choice. Now that's an apparency, but it is there. So as an individual, there is empowerment. So there's the point value of consciousness that is appearing within the everything. So it's to me it's very important not to feel disempowered, because there is always the option to do something as an individual, and the infinite intelligence is actually coming through to make it clear what that is. So therefore it's really trusting one's own inner knowing above all else. So, you know, you may hear ideas that there's nothing that you can do, but actually the thing that overrides all of that is one's own inner knowing, because the inner knowing will tell you whether that is actually valid for you at that point or whether it isn't valid. And really the most important thing is one's own inner knowing, not a concept of being impotent or the idea that there's nothing that you can do.
Can you put the question again so I can comment on the paradox in it?
Okay.
Word for word.
Question.
Listen to this carefully.
This is coming from a conscious TV viewer. If what I am cannot be conceptualized, and conceptualization has no author, then am I powerless?
Yes, so it's like, if I don't exist, am I powerless? I mean, you know, can you hear the paradox in the question? That's what I hear. And I think this is a kind of misinterpretation which is often given to what is said here. Like if it's said that, you know, there is nothing to be done, there is no one to do anything. I mean, a few years ago I wrote about the great mantra, hopeless, helpless and meaningless. And I'm very surprised still about how many people kind of contact me about that and say, I heard that was such relief.
A lot for people, this thing about being powerless,
yes,
because they have the idea of no one being
so
there.
That's
why I
this,
really want to try and get.
So how this is heard is that this is, if you like, a communication that says you are a person and you are powerless, and that is a complete mishearing of it. You know, what is being said here at least is there is no person. So how can you be powerless when you is a fiction? So being powerful or being powerless does not come into this.
So then, what is power?
What is power? Well, in the
Yes.
question, I mean, I'm just sort of responding
This is
to the
my
question,
question now.
and
What
in
is
in
power?
the terms in which that question is asked, I think what that really comes down to is there anything that I can do, or am I personally powerless? And what I'm saying is, in a way, that question, it's an irrelevant question. It's an unanswerable question because the terms in which it's asked are false. There is no person to be powerless or powerful.
But what does power mean to you?
What does power mean to me?
Yes.
I would have to answer that question by saying it would depend what context you wanted to ask to put that term in. It could have so many different meanings depending on the context. But in terms of the context in which we're talking about here, I would say it is irrelevant. The question, am I a powerful person or am I a powerless person? Underneath, cutting through both of those questions like a sword may be the realisation, I'm not a person. So how can I be either a powerful or a powerless person?
Okay, Tim.
Well, see, for me, the paradoxity, the polarity of the situation is what opens up these questions. I mean, I agree with Richard. One of the problems is you come into this you come back, you dissolve back, always feels like to me it's metaphor, into this spacious emptiness, like discovering the dreamer within which all of this is arising. And there's no Tim. Now, one of the things you can get is, there is no Tim to choose, you'll hear. There's no person to decide this, you'll hear. And then suddenly it becomes like, oh, so Tim's this puppet. Is he? Is that what he is? Everything just happens? But I agree with Richard, it's not saying that. What this is saying is there's really no Tim. There's no separateness. There's no division between anything. There's just the flow of the Tao, if you use a Chinese term. There's just this unfolding. And within that unfolding, like a dream, there's all this separateness. And there's Tim. And Tim has the experience of choosing and of being powerful or not being powerful, or doing something in response or not doing it. Now, who is doing that? Well, like in a dream, it's all being done by the dreamer. And yet, like in a dream, you have the experience of individual volition. So my individual volition, when I first started exploring this Advaita and oneness, it felt like, oh, that's the thing which is in the way. Now it feels like it's not in the way at all. Actually, that profound sense that we have that our individual volition is very precious is because it is very precious. Because everything is happening as one, but through Tim right now, that oneness is consciously choosing this word, not that word. It's not consciously choosing to be the glass. It's not consciously choosing to be the floor. But it is consciously choosing this, in this form. And that seems to me immensely precious. So there's where the power is. The power comes through this. The one comes through someone and empowers me to say something. And that is a really important thing. So it's not either or, it's both and. That's the key for me. We don't have to see, look, it's either all just happening or, I'm just this little guy. And it's like, no, they're both happening. They're both true in different ways. And so that normal, everyday humanity that we have is not something we need to somehow see through, get away from, but actually something which becomes intensely precious. As you see that the background is just this one. There's one of us dancing as many. And within the dance of duality, there will be power and powerlessness. There will be moments when you know what to do and what speaks to you, and there'll be times when you don't. There'll be times when you need to go through some difficulty, perhaps, to reach some place you wouldn't have reached otherwise. There'll be all of the play, which is a life, and which is absolutely unique for each person. And it's happening already. It's already happening. That's what we're in, it seems to me.
Can I pick up the idea of a nighttime dream? Because I think sometimes this is a fairly good metaphor. I mean, let's say I had a dream last night, a nighttime dream in which I powerfully repulsed an attacker. Was I powerful in that dream? Well, no, because nothing happened. There was no me, there was no powerful attacker. It was a dream. I don't know if this metaphor works, but I try it sometimes.
You see, I want to say the same thing as Richard, but in a different tone of voice. I want to go, and I was powerful in a dream, rather than nothing happened. Because to me, it happened. That dream happened, and that's fantastic. And I had that experience of being powerful, and I made choices, and we did this thing. And through that, the accumulation of experience which has been had is greater. The evolution of this process of the individual and of the collective is richer. Something has happened, and that's good. That's great.
David, would you like to say something to the
I
power
just,
game?
the nature of everything that comes under discussion is subject to the laws of polarity, because the nature of existence, the nature of pure existence, of what we truly are, is beyond words. It's beyond power or disempowerment. Only when it's brought in to a level of manifestation can there be qualities to it. So, you can align with a particular quality. Tim wants to be powerful in a dream. Richard is, seemed slightly disempowered, but it just it depends on the choice.
Please.
It just depends on the choice.
I have been misconstrued. We'll come back to that. Maybe.
It just depends on how you experience it. I mean, we've all experienced empowerment and disempowerment, and ultimately there is no one to experience empowerment or disempowerment, because all there is just this open space of being, using those words. The nature of words is, though, you can get into a kind of, with non-duality, it can become this kind of purist practice where we're carefully using these words in a particular way. But actually, to me, that just becomes defensive. There's no need to have a particular concept that you're holding as to whether there is someone or there isn't someone. You can have someone one day and you can have no one the other day. It's however you wish to experience it. And in a relative sense, there is choice. There is the apparency of choice, and that's a wonderful thing. It's something you can just really enjoy. In an absolute sense, you could say there's no choice, but it depends, where in that point of focus you wish to choose to look. If you're looking from the point of the infinite absolute being, that infinite absolute being is doing nothing. It's still, it's timeless. You can't add words to it at all. You could come to the point where you say, well, actually, I recognize, at this point a bit closer, you could say, well, I recognize that I am the infinite being. And then you come down here and you think, well, I'm a powerful person. You come down here and you can think I'm a disempowered person. But it just depends on where you wish to experience in that kind of projection, of the manifestation. But to me, it's really that, for much of humanity, what you could say is there's the idea that, we really are this person. What I feel these days is that the way most human beings experience, it's actually been imposed on us. I think that there is actually an agenda on Earth where people, have been mind controlled. Limitations have come in. The idea that you are this little person and all you can do is watch the X Factor, go to work and work really hard and you haven't got any choice, and all of these things. That's something that's actually been imposed. But I think, there is also in the story of the consciousness of Earth, there appears to be an awakening, so that more and more are kind of stepping back from that, and there's a kind of opening where people are realizing, well, actually, I'm not just this character here. Yes, there is this character with certain limitations. Within this construct, there are all sorts of limitations. There's the idea of an aging process. There's the idea of illness. There's the idea of success and failure, all these things. But actually, you can, what comes in sometimes is the idea that there is a choice, that you can actually choose to subscribe to all of that, or you can choose to step back. And what I've noticed is the more there's an acceptance that infinite consciousness can actually come into life and control things. So there isn't mind predominance, but the infinite consciousness that underlies everything, that can begin to come in, and there can be incredible empowerment. But it isn't empowerment you as an individual, it is the empowerment of omnipotent consciousness.
Yeah, it was what I was kind of trying to get at when I was saying to you what does power mean to you, because I know myself, I feel power, but it's often not a personal. It's not like I feel powerful, but there's I can feel it now. There's power somehow. I think you were touching on this, but anyway, you wanted to jump in.
Yes,
again.
I wanted to come back to this dream thing. I mean, what the point I was trying to make about my hypothetical dream wasn't about either empowerment or powerlessness. The point was, it is a dream. And I think, I mean, maybe this metaphor may work or maybe it won't, but I think it's something about the personal mind. We do love to speculate endlessly, making up stories about things which have no importance and no reality. And I don't know if this metaphor will work, but I'm going to try another dream metaphor. I think, a lot of the things that the mind ties itself up with, it's as if, let's say, I had a dream last night in which I got on a train in London to go to Bradford, and I woke up as the train went past Birmingham, and I posed the question, did the train get to Bradford on time or not? Now, I hope you get... I'm asking a question about something,
That's lovely.
which... It's a kind of nonsense question. There is no answer to that question. It was a dream. There was no me on the train. There was no Bradford, Birmingham, or a train. But there is something about the makeup of our psychology and the human mind that we love to, if you like, entertain ourselves with speculation about stories which have no more meaning than did the train get to Bradford on time after I woke up?
We'll never know.
Oh no!
That's my point.
We've got about 7-8 minutes left. I'm going to try one more question, which I like this question. And again, it's fairly typical of ones that have come in. They say there is no technique or procedure that works for realization of non-duality. However, Eckhart Tolle says that getting to know ego by noticing the thoughts and emotions it generates is getting to know who we are not, and that goes a long way towards removing the main blocks to knowing who we are already. So I think it's probably David's turn to start.
Thank you. What I feel about Eckhart Tolle is that what Eckhart is talking about is the evolution of the relative aspect of consciousness, which is to do with experience, it's to do with content, it's to do with experiencing more silence and doing meditation and being present and all of those things in a conscious way, which in their own realm they're fun, but really they're no more real than Richard's trip to Bradford. But they're entertainment, and so, if you're doing that and it feels good, that's fine. If you're in a dream trip to Bradford and that you're enjoying that, that's okay. Whether you know the outcome or not doesn't really make any difference, or whether it's progressive or not. Ultimately, the nature of realization is just a simple realization of what is already the case. And I like what one of my previous teachers, Roger Linden, I love the thing that Roger says, which is that it's really a case of mistaken identity, that we think that there isn't anything that we have to evolve towards or we have to purify or do any sort of practice towards. It's simply seeing that what you thought was you as an individual was actually never you, that what you really are is you're already the impersonal being. It's just that you thought that you weren't. So when you thought you weren't, you thought that there was something that you needed to do. But it's just simply a case of mistaken identity.
Okay, we need to, thank you, we need to, 2 minutes for each of you. Sorry, it's a pressure.
Okay, look, realisation, I don't even know what that is anymore. Look, I'm not really interested in that, to be honest. I don't know how to answer the gentleman's question or woman's question. To me, it's about love. That's the thing which we're moving towards, because love is what unites the two as one. When the oneness, this impersonal and the personal come together, there's this big, big love. And can you do things to move towards that? For sure you can. That's why life's so wonderful, because you can enter into it in a spirit of exploration, and there's, lots of things you can do. And they're all, you can dance, you can sing, you can play, you can make love, you can do so many things. You can live your life consciously. And if you do that, this space just opens up of itself, because David's right, it's there all the time. It's just there. You don't have to change yourself to get there. It's there. You pay attention, and there it is. And it's not some, like, for me, it is, this is maybe a realization, but the experience is what happens in the body. And what happens in the body is love. What you do is you come into love with it. And that's when you know. If I meet someone and they're in love, I know they've got it. If they're not in love, I know they haven't got it. For me, the thing I'm interested in.
Thank you.
Well, the specific question about Eckhart Tolle, there are many, many, many techniques that people can do, some of which will make life for a person more comfortable and are quite healthy in that sense. Some of them are pretty unhealthy and will tend to make life worse for a person, and none of which have anything to do with what we're talking about. Absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about, because what we're talking about is not the person and how the person can be changed for better or for worse. And I'd just add to that, picking up on what Tim last said, I would say a jolly good way of describing this is, yes, it's falling in love with the everyday. It's falling in love. I mean, I don't know if it's a little over-romantic to talk about falling in love with a glass of water. And maybe we are also still in the land of metaphor when I say that. But it's as good a metaphor as anything. This is about falling in love with the everyday.
Thank you. Have you got any last comments?
Well, I was
Renate?
just thinking, that's beautiful, but if somebody hears that and doesn't know how to pay the bills and is stuck somewhere in suffering, it's quite a big step.
It's an impossible step, because there is no step.
Yeah. So I guess we have to first.
I just want to, for me, what my journey has led me to is exactly doing that, and I suspect it's like that for these gentlemen too. I take people, we spend a weekend together, and a majority of people can experience this.
Yes.
And enter into a place where they come into this big love. Now, it will be different for all of them. Not all of them will come out and experience the whole impersonal thing in different ways. Yeah. But they will experience it. And once you've tasted this gnosis, this knowing, that's the most important. You know. If you know, you feel the love, the gnosis is something anyone can touch. And it takes a weekend. Yeah. In my experience, for most people, that's all it takes. Yeah. Now, doesn't mean you'll walk back into your life and not forget it. But it's an initiation. You've touched it,
you can
and that
remember.
is available. It really, really is, and it's so important that people know that. Because we're all in it together. There's nothing special about me. I'm guessing there isn't something special about any of us. It's there. It really is.
Yeah. We're all in it together.
We're in it together.
I think that's a great place to finish this first part of this discussion, this panel on non-duality. I'd like to thank you all. Richard Sylvester, I'm going to mention your two currently available books, hold them to the camera there, and Tim Freke, again, thank you, Tim, for coming in, your two books, and thank you, David,
CD.
and the CD, Lucid Living, and David Bingham, who's yet to write his first bestseller. Thank you very much for coming in and being part of the panel, and thank you very much for watching Conscious TV, and a special thank you to the people that spent the time to send in the questions, and do search around on Conscious TV for part 2 of this particular panel. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Goodbye.